For 40 years, the U.S.-led global economy has produced an enormous improvement in human welfare. Since 1981, the proportion of the world's population living in extreme poverty on less than $1.90 per day has fallen from 42% to 10%. But in countries with advanced economies, inequality of income and wealth has surged. And nowhere has it surged more than in the U.S., where reliance on free market forces has been strongest. That magnifies rewards for those at the top and leaves most others behind. The trend helps those with higher levels of education and hurts the less educated. It lifts residents of major cities while leaving those in small towns behind. For growing numbers of Americans, it's just harder to get ahead. Why has this happened, and what are the consequences?
The world is watching the drama unfold in Washington. New census data from the Pew Research Center was released just last week. The cold, sobering facts of the gap between the rich and the poor in this country may have gotten lost as Americans worried about the country defaulting for the first time in history. But joining us now to talk about this is sociologist Dr. Jack Berg. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
You know, and this did come out last week, and people paid little attention to it, and of course, because we've been sort of in this crisis mode with the debt ceiling. But as a sociologist, when the numbers came out that whites have 20 times more wealth than minorities in this country, blacks and Hispanics, that's pretty sobering.
It's really sobering, and it also kind of pointed to how much more dramatically the economic downturn has affected minority populations.
Right. You know, back in the day, like when the Kerner Commission did the report that we were a society that was two societies and unequal, separate and unequal. Well, now there's not only the whites, but we have Hispanics and blacks. And so that's got to be way different for when sociologists look at this time of history.
It's changing the number of individuals who are down there at the bottom level, and it also creates the circumstances where they can now see each other as the problem. And it distracts, to a certain extent, the conversation from the structural problems that created it.
Right, and we're looking at these figures. The white household, 113,149, Hispanic households and African Americans. And of course, Dr. Burke, when you talk about this wealth, that's way different than talking about income.
Income is the money we make each year. And when you take a look at the income numbers, the discrepancies collapse a little bit, but they're still there. Wealth, though, is what we all think about as the American dream: our house, the money that we have in the bank, investments that we have.
Our assets.
Exactly.
And that's where the figures are just, you know, it's pitiful, $6,000 and $5,000. I mean, when do we reach a boiling point when this gap continues to widen and deepen?
You're asking really an interesting question, because to a certain extent, people need to feel invested in the economy, that they have an opportunity to succeed. But as these numbers start to develop, and as the discrepancy becomes greater, you really start to wonder whether people are going to ask the question, is there really an opportunity for me to succeed in this situation?
Right.